Good Sunday morning, beloveds. We are gathered again in our sanctuary, and we begin our service of worship by lighting our Christ candle. We light it as a reminder of the one who breathes creative and hope-filled life into every one of us, the one who inspires us to take notice of everything around us and to sing praises for the simplest of things. We light this candle as a sign and symbol of the one who is as close to us as the ground beneath our feet and as warm as the sun above our heads. As we gather to worship our Creator God, we remember that we are gathered here on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. May we strive to live with respect on this land and in peace and friendship with its people. Welcome, everyone, to this service of worship. In our second one in June, it's been a beautiful month so far, nature-wise. We've had some beautiful, sunny, warm, hot days. We've had some drenching rains that have nourished the earth. We have greenery and flowers bursting forth all around us, and the fruits of our gardens, in some cases, my rhubarb has run amok. And so I've been enjoying that fresh burst of flavor that has come with that. I hope that you are finding ways to nourish and nurture your own spirits these days. There's a lot going on in our world, a lot that we need to be attentive to, we need to not look away from, and at the same time find ways to nourish our hearts so that we build our resiliency to stay steadfast and strong in the movement toward justice for all of God's people. This week is the today we're celebrating World Refugee Day, which is a day declared by the United Nations to be marked on June 20th. And it's a call for communities around the world to work toward peace and security for all people, remembering especially the millions of people who are displaced or forcibly uprooted from their homes. And so today we're going to celebrate that. We're going to have a litany that is, I'll share with you the name of the community when we get to it, built out of a conversation and communion in a community that extends hospitality to refugees. And it's a litany that shares some stories in their own first words, a couple of stories of two different refugees. And so we'll hear that. We'll hear a bit of just short bits of invitations to reflect around that, and have some prayers and have some hymns, and hold in our hearts as we worship the God of all, not only those of us who are comfortable in our status quo, but also all of those people around the world that in many cases our way of living is creating conditions that are unlivable in other places. So we honor and celebrate World Refugee Day on this Sunday during our service of worship. Let's start our service with our hymn. We'll sing the first verse of "And on This Path," and we'll have our call to worship, and then we'll sing the second verse. So you have the words if you have opened your email and gotten the bulletin that was sent around, or if you have your printed copy. I invite you to have that ready so that you can both sing and also enter into the prayers with me. So let us join our voices. And on this path, the gates of holiness are open wide. And on this path, the gates of holiness are open wide. And on this path, the gates of holiness are open wide, open wide, open wide, open wide. The gates are open wide. Love calls us to beware, to keep alert, to pay attention. Evil will react when the kingdom draws near. Like sheep among wolves, the truth tellers will be preyed upon. The healers will be ridiculed. The ones who raise life from death will be handed over. In knowledge of evil's way, we watch and we take action. We protect each other. We examine our hearts. We trust the Spirit to give us courage. The faithful one will uphold the righteous and deliver us from evil. Let God's holy presence come and manifest among us. So enter in. The gates of holiness are open wide. So enter in. The gates of holiness are open wide. So enter in. The gates of holiness are open wide. Open wide. Open wide, open wide, the gates are open wide. Let us pray. Holy Parent, by your Spirit we are made family. You weave together the hearts and lives of all who seek your liberating love. Enable us to be faithful to one another, committed above all else to the works of the Spirit that heal and free and renew. Amen. With wisdom and with tenderness, the Spirit guides us through chaos and challenges. As community, we are made capable of doing hard things together. We are called to proclaim the good news through our actions of solidarity and care. Let us bring our offerings together that our resources may be shared as justice draws near. We have our offering plate as a sign and symbol of all of the things that we offer to our community, this community of faith, and our wider community here in Spryfield, here in Nova Scotia, Canada, the world, our global community. There are so many ways that people continue to give of themselves, to give things that fit in an envelope and go in the offering plate or through the mail slot, however it is that you're delivering and offering those physical offerings, and all of the intangible gifts of heart, of care, of presence. I think that we sometimes forget how much of a gift our presence is together. And even though we are still in the time of pandemic and will be for quite some time, we can find ways to join our hearts and our energies and our spirits like we are on Sunday mornings when we, in my mind, we are still very much coming together for worship on Sunday mornings. And we can still continue to do that in some of our other ways, find new ways of connecting. Missing dreadfully, and we don't diminish the ways in which we miss those physical forms of contact, the hugs, the touch on the arm, little kiss on a cheek. We all miss those very, very much. And so for now, we hold that space, the mixed range of emotions that we all feel as we gift our presence to one another in the different ways that we can find going forward, so that we none of us feel isolated and alone. Let us sing our response. What can I do? What can I bring? What can I say? What can I sing? I'll sing with joy, I'll say a prayer, I'll bring my love, I'll do my share. What can I do? What can I bring? What can I say? What can I sing? I'll sing with joy, I'll say a prayer, I'll bring my love, I'll do my share. God of the weary and the oppressed, receive our offerings and renew our hearts. Though we grow tired, we rely on you and on each other. Come and make us faithful disciples. We remember your promises of love's liberating power, and we hold tight to the nourishment and comfort you provide. Amen. So we share now a litany called Refugee Evensong. It was created within a community in the UK, in England, that offers hospitality to refugees. It's called the Woolman House Community, and it's a beautiful litany, and it might have come out of a particular context in a particular place, but we know that experiences of refugees and responses of countries are both unique and particular, and also there's a commonality and a universality to the ways in which refugee experiences and the ways in which countries are responding to those. And so we can enter into this space knowing that if there are references to the UK, we are very much in the same sort of space in Canada of wanting to be welcoming and yet still being fearful of thinking that we're going to be too welcoming, and still there's still people that are fearful of opening boundaries and borders too wide, even without the pandemic. And it's difficult now in the midst of a pandemic to think about the ways that we can respond to this need for people to find refuge and asylum in the world. Let us start with prayer. God of all, where are your children? Let us welcome God's children who are far from home. God of all, why is there crying? Let us hear the cries of the refugees and respond with love. God of all, who is praying? Let us pray with families who are broken apart, seeking comfort and justice. A story from a refugee. I was born in the town of Nyanza in Rwanda. My mother died naturally in 1987, but my father was murdered in the killings. They also killed my first son, Alain. They attacked me and thought they had killed me too. That's how I got these scars on my head and on my hand. It was very bad in my country, so we decided to run away. We walked for 7 months to get out of the country. When we got out, my wife and child arrived in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, at a refugee camp in Ghana. It was very bad in the camp. Many people were sick from cholera. Then there was a war started between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, and they wanted to kill Rwandan people. So we tried to get out of the country into Congo, Brazzaville, from Matthew's Gospel. Now after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and he killed all of the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. "A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more." Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you are forced to leave your home. You don't know if you will ever come back. Perhaps you are worried about other members of your family. What is happening to them? Will you see them again? You are leaving on foot, so you cannot take much with you. What would you take? God weeps at love withheld, at strength misused, at children's innocence abused, until we change the way we love. God weeps, God bleeds at anger's fist, at trust betrayed, at women battered and afraid, until we change the way we win. God bleeds, God cries at hungry mouths, at running sores, at creatures dying without cause, until we change the way we care. God cries. God waits for stones to melt, for peace to seed, for hearts that hold each other's need, until we understand the Christ. God waits. The story of the journey continues. We tried to get to the border, but there was a big lake there, and troops from the government chasing us. We had to cross over the lake with rafts that we made from trees. Many refugees fell into the water and died there. When we crossed over, we arrived in Bandaka, where we waited for a ship that was taking refugees away. But the ship just left and never came back for us. We started to walk through the bush. We had nothing to eat and had to live on what we could find on the way. The people in the villages took our money and clothes to let us pass through. We lived like that until we arrived in the country of Congo, Brazzaville. I stayed with my wife and second son in a refugee camp. My daughter was born there. I started a job, but then a big war began in Brazzaville. The president started to take young Rwanda men out of the camp to fight in the war. Many boys died in that war. Many of my friends. And when they came for me, I had to run away again. My wife was left behind in the refugee camp. So I don't know what happened to her. Since that time, I've had no news of her or my children. A reading from Exodus. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed toward the people. And they said, "What have we done letting Israel leave our service?" So he had his chariot made ready, and he took his army with him. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt?" Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. And the Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea, after them all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and chariot drivers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. Think for a moment about your journey as a refugee, as we imagine ourselves in those shoes. Having to escape from those who would want to kill you, how would you get out of the country without being caught? Are you still in shock from what has happened to you? Maybe you're starting to be frightened about what will face you when you arrive somewhere new. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger. My love is stronger than your fear. Don't be afraid. My love is stronger, and I have promised to be always near. There are some 23 million refugees in the world. There are some 70 million displaced people in this world, 23 of whom have become refugees outside of their own countries, uprooted from their homes by war, by persecution, by economic or political collapse. Most of these people live in countries bordering their own. Poorer countries like Pakistan and Iran are host to millions of refugees, while only a small portion ever reach countries like Britain, like Canada. Other European countries have been accepting growing numbers of asylum seekers for many years. And Britain's strong cultural links to former colonies and Canada's reputation for fairness and tolerance have led some to believe they will find a fair healing and hearing in our countries. Hear now the story of another refugee from Kenya. I fled from Kenya the 26th of June and applied for asylum immediately. However, before I could say anything, I was already condemned as a single young man without any fixed address. I had all of the reasons to be put in prison for the first time in my life, and whereas I hadn't committed any crime, I was locked in prison like a convicted person. Can you imagine the shock and the questions raised in those first days? How long am I going to stay here? Is there somebody going to help me get out? Nobody could, because nobody knew I was in prison. And the more I talked to other refugees, the more depressed I felt, as some were there for 6 and 9 months already. After 1 week, you realize that you are completely trapped, and it becomes very hard as the fear, the anxiety, and the depression begin to grow inside. I lost my sleep and began to suffer all sorts of pain like headache and backache. I didn't know what my rights were or what to expect. After 2 months, still no change. I missed doing simple things like going to the library or to university, having coffee with a friend, or doing shopping. The depressing routine of the prison was still going on. Only 1 shower per week, 1 hour of TV per week, 1 hour of walking per day. I thought I would die here, failing to achieve anything. I heard about my father's death. I didn't eat for 4 days. I was crying in my room and wanted to die. People kept visiting, and 1 person agreed to be my bail surety. On the 18th of September, I got bail. I was free in 10 minutes. I couldn't believe that in only 10 minutes I was free, able to come back to real life and to build my own future. I am still haunted by that experience. A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand and the goats at the left. And then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it that we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly, I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." When I needed a neighbor, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a neighbor, were you there? And the creed and the color and the name won't matter, were you there? I was hungry and thirsty, were you there? Were you there? I was hungry and thirsty, were you there? And the creed and the color and the name won't matter, were you there? I was cold, I was naked, were you there? Were you there? I was cold, I was naked, were you there? And the creed and the color and the name won't matter, were you there? When I needed a healer, were you there? Were you there? When I needed a healer, were you there? And the creed and the color and the name won't matter, were you there? Wherever you travel, I'll be there, I'll be there. Wherever you travel, I'll be there. And the creed and the color and the name won't matter, I'll be there. Now, the governments of Europe are in competition to deter asylum seekers by making their lives increasingly difficult and dangerous. In this country, that can mean destitution, homelessness, and indefinite imprisonment without charge or trial, as happened to the young Kenyan man we have just heard about, who was later accepted by our government as entitled to political asylum. That story from the UK is not one that we can dismiss and say, that's them, not us. The stories that we hear in the United States, the caravans being turned away at the border, of families being torn apart, of children being lost, of children dying, of people dying and being kept in cages. Those are not stories that we can point at others and say, not us. We are invited to think not only about how we welcome asylum seekers who make it to our borders and are able to claim refuge in Canada. We're invited to think about the ones who are prevented from reaching our borders through all of the policies and politics and rules that the holders of power have put in place. One must seek asylum and refuge in the first country that you come to. And what if that country doesn't want you or abuses you? Canada and US have an agreement called the Safe Third Country Agreement, which means anyone who first seeks refuge in one of our countries cannot then turn around and seek refuge in the other. We assume that they are going to find safe refuge. So we have an enormous amount of people seeking refuge in the States, as that is the first place that they come to on that land border. Whether they're coming from South America, from Central America, from Mexico, from a lot of countries that our capitalism and consumerism and corporations have contributed to the conditions that cause them and coerce them to flee. And they arrive and they are turned away or tortured or otherwise abused, arrested, detained. And if they somehow manage to make their way up through the States and hit the Canadian border and try to enter and claim refuge, Canada says, no, go back to the States. We have an agreement that that is a safe country. So we are complicit in what is happening to refugees in the States. We cannot turn away and deny what is happening. We're not directly responsible. We are not the ones holding guns or locking the cages, but we are also denying refuge to those who are managing to get past that and reach our border, seeking a safe country. And we're still crafting immigration policy from a mindset of scarcity and entitlement, believing that the earth beneath our feet is somehow ours alone to possess and not, after all, God's world for all to share. We're still complicit, as I mentioned, in displacing people, in creating refugees in other parts of the world, believing that the parts of nature that we call resources are the property of giant corporations to extract and to profit from, and not, after all, part of God's world for all to share. Imagine a world in which people, including the indigenous people of the land all around the globe, are not forced or coerced or impoverished into fleeing their homes and seeking asylum or economic opportunity elsewhere. What changes can we make that might help move the world closer to that new reality of shalom, of God's kingdom here and now? It's a huge and daunting question, but there are things that we can do. We can choose not to buy from corporations with a history of human rights violations or harmful environmental policies and practices. We can write our government to hold those corporations to account. We can press our government to continue expanding our immigration and refugee policies. We can learn from refugees in our own communities, hearing their stories and engaging with them, not as charity projects or as guests, but as equal participants in the mutual community of God. We can do very concrete things like sign the petition supported by the United Church of Canada, demanding that Canada investigate and prosecute human rights violations by mining companies around the world. We can find a couple of friends who are passionate about the particular justice issue that lights a fire in your bones and brainstorm together actions. Or find a group that's already engaged in that issue and join your energies to theirs. You can find out what your United Church is doing and is up to locally, regionally, nationally, and participate in the ministries of justice, of advocacy, action. I'll put a note I'll send out a note letting you know how you can sign up to the national and regional newsletters so that you can find out what your church is up to. It is bigger than only any one congregation, and so I've been signed up to those newsletters long before I was in ministry, because it is up to each of us as individuals to become engaged, to make ourselves aware of what our church is up to in the world, so that we can collectively join in and plug into areas that we think that we have some gifts to share. And there are prayers too. We know that we need to go beyond prayer in order to change systemic inequality and injustice, but this is hard work. And prayer is a good place to start, to ground ourselves and to soften our hearts. Let us pray for asylum seekers. Compassionate one, our society has failed you. You were a refugee seeking safety and freedom, and we did not welcome you. You were naked and exposed with inadequate shelter and insufficient pay, and we did not fight with you for equal rights. You were fearful of being detained or deported without a just trial, and we did not provide you sanctuary. We seek forgiveness for the ways we have forsaken you, our God, and we offer our thanks for the communities, for the people, for the organizations who have extended welcome, advocated for justice, and provided sanctuary to people seeking refuge despite opposition. Teacher, your instructions are clear. We shall not oppress migrant people, nor deprive them of justice, nor practice extortion or commit robbery against them. We shall love strangers as ourselves, for we have been strangers. We shall share our harvest, our homes, and our lives with others, thus extending the same hospitality that you have selflessly shared. We shall advocate for the human rights of all people. Give us the steadfast persistence needed to follow your commandments in these challenging times, remembering that the love and respect that we show to each other is the love that we show to you, our compassionate teacher. Amen. Let's close by singing what is many of our one of our favorite hymns of discipleship and witness and answering that call from God. Here I am, Lord. I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in deepest sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make the darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. I, the Lord of snow and rain, I have borne my people's pain. I have wept for love of them, they turn away. I will break their hearts of stone, give them hearts for love alone. I will speak my word to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. We are not made powerless before evil. We need not cower or turn away. The Spirit of Christ sends us out to live out the good news. God equips us. God enables us. God empowers us. May our shared longings for justice be a source of strength and hope in times of trouble. Go with peace and welcome the presence of God. Hope shines as the solitary star. Faith is the inner light. You and I together mirror the light of lights and illumine the pathway home. Peace shines as the solitary star. Faith is the inner light. You and I together mirror the light of lights and illumine the pathway home.